Right now, Mexico City is home to 22 million people. It's one of the largest urban areas on the planet, and feeding it is a daily crisis. Food travels hundreds of miles to get there. Water is pumped from depleted aquifers. Farmland outside the city is exhausted from overuse. This is the 21st century's food problem, and it has no clean solution. Except it does. A 700-year-old system, on a lake, solved this exact problem for 300,000 people. No synthetic fertilizers. No GPS-guided tractors. No industrial supply chains. Just water, mud, and a people who refuse to let a swamp stop them. Right now, scientists and urban planners are studying that system, not to understand history, to copy it. Because the Aztecs accidentally solved problems that modern agriculture is still struggling with today. The year is 1325. A nomadic people called the Mexica have been wandering for generations. Their own records say they were searching for a divine sign. An eagle on a cactus, devouring a serpent. They found it on a swampy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Not ideal real estate. The land was waterlogged. The soil was unstable. There was almost no flat ground to farm. A lesser civilization would have kept moving. The Mexica built. Here's how they did it. First, farmers waded into the shallow lake bed. They drove wooden stakes into the mud, then wove branches and twigs between those stakes, creating underwater fences. Then came the layers. Reed mats. Mud dredged from the lake bottom. Rotting vegetation. More mud. More vegetation. That pile rose above the waterline. It became land that didn't exist before. At the corners of each plot, they planted fast-growing willow trees. The roots drove into the lake bed, locking the whole island in place. Each finished chinampa was roughly 30 meters long and 2.5 meters wide. Long, narrow rectangular islands arranged in grids, separated by canals just wide enough for a canoe. From above, the whole system looked like a giant green waffle. Those canals weren't just for transport. They were the irrigation system. Water constantly wicked upward through the soil by capillary action, naturally reaching the plant roots from below. No pumps. No pipes. No guesswork. Fertilization was built in, too. Farmers regularly scraped nutrient-rich muck from the canal floors and spread it back onto the plots. They also collected human waste from the city in canoes and applied it directly to the soil. One system handled sanitation and fertility simultaneously. The Aztecs didn't produce waste. They recycled it. And that made the soil so rich it produced harvest numbers that shouldn't have been possible. Here's what those harvest numbers actually were. According to multiple academic sources, a well-maintained chinampa could produce up to 7 harvests per year. 7. From the same plot. In 12 months. Research published through the University of British Columbia confirms the chinampas produced high and sustained yields without requiring large energy inputs or external materials. According to published archaeological research, the maize yield sat at around 3 metric tons per hectare per year. That's 3 to 4 times the output of other agricultural methods used in the same region at the same time. Now compare that to today. Modern industrial agriculture, the system feeding most of the world, uses roughly 70% of the planet's freshwater. It does this through external irrigation, pumped from rivers, groundwater, or reservoirs brought in from far away. And the soil it's working with? It's depleting. Decades of monoculture farming strip the nutrients that make land productive. Synthetic fertilizers replace what's lost, temporarily. But they don't rebuild the soil. They mask the damage. Most industrial farmland manages 1, maybe 2 harvests per year. The chinampa used capillary action from a canal and nutrient cycling from sediment. Modern farming uses pumped water and manufactured chemicals. One is a closed loop. One is a pipeline, and the pipeline is running dry. The Aztec system generated its own fertility. The canal floor replenished the plot. The plot waste returned to the canal. Round and round. No inputs from outside the system. No depletion. A 700-year-old design that looks, to anyone studying it today, like the farming model we should have built instead. But how did we lose it? In 1521, the Spanish conquistadors arrived. Within 2 years, the greatest city in the Western Hemisphere fell. Tenochtitlan was dismantled. By then, it housed somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 people, roughly 5 times the size of London at the same moment in history, according to historical records. The temples came down. The causeways were destroyed. The canals were filled in. And then the Spanish made a decision that would reshape this landscape for centuries. They drained the lakes. The vast network of water, islands, and canals that had made the chinampas system possible, gone. Deliberately removed. Replaced with dry land that could be parceled, sold, and farmed using European methods. The chinampas didn't vanish overnight. They shrank, decade by decade, generation by generation, as the water that gave them life was systematically eliminated. An earthquake in 1985 damaged many of the remaining canals. Urban sprawl consumed what was left. Water quality declined. What had been a shimmering network of floating farms became pavement. And then it became one of the most overcrowded, food-stressed cities on the planet. The knowledge wasn't lost. The farmers who knew how to build chinampas didn't disappear. But the lakes they needed? Gone. And here's the number that should stop you cold. At their peak, according to published archaeological research, 9,000 hectares of chinampas surrounded the basin of Mexico. 1 hectare, about 2.5 acres, could reportedly feed 20 people. 9,000 hectares, 180,000 people fed, sustained, year after year, without depleting the soil that fed them. And at its height, the system was supporting a city of 200,000 to 300,000, roughly the same population as Amsterdam today. Now look at the same geography today. Mexico City sits on the dry bed of that same lake system. It holds 22 million people. According to sources, only about 2,200 hectares of chinampa land survives in Xochimilco, the southern remnant of what was once 9,000. And reportedly only around 10% of that is actively used for farming. Of that 10%, just 2% practices the traditional polycropping methods that made the system so productive. The rest? Flowers for markets. Tourist boat rides on the remaining canals. But here's what even a fraction of the old system can still do. According to Reasons to be Cheerful, one farmer, Jose Pais, manages 7,000 square meters of chinampa. His plot produces up to 100 kilograms of broccoli per day, alongside fresh herbs, spinach, chard, radishes, corn, and kale, all sold at local markets in southern Mexico City. One farmer, one ancient plot, 100 kilograms of food every single day. Researchers at Xochimilco have stated that the surviving chinampas could theoretically produce enough lettuce, herbs, and broccoli for the entire city. The entire city. 22 million people. They fed 300,000 from a lake. We're struggling to feed 22 million from the dry bed of that same lake. What happened? We forgot something, and we're only now starting to remember it. Here's where the story turns. Roland Ebel, a researcher at Montana State University's Sustainable Food Systems program, published findings on chinampas that he didn't expect to write. He called the chinampa one of the most intensive and prolific production systems ever developed. His recommendation: cities with water access should seriously consider adapting this model for 21st century urban food production, because it works better than what replaced it. In Xochimilco today, that revival is already underway, quietly, slowly, but real. An initiative called the Etiqueta Chinampra, the Chinampra label, markets agrochemical-free produce from traditional chinampa plots. Farmers are being trained in polycropping techniques. Canals are being reconditioned using natural water filters. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated all of it. When global supply chains fractured in 2020, local food systems didn't look archaic anymore. They looked essential. Cities that had dismissed urban farming as a niche experiment started looking at what Xochimilco's farmers had been doing for centuries. And here's the part that doesn't usually get told. The canals of Xochimilco are one of the last remaining habitats of the axolotl, the critically endangered Mexican salamander that can regenerate its own limbs and has become one of the most studied animals in biomedical research. When the chinampas function, the water stays clean. The ecosystem holds. The axolotl survives. When chinampas are abandoned, the habitat collapses. The canals stagnate. The axolotl disappears. The ancient farming system and one of the world's most scientifically important animals are bound together. Restore one, you restore the other. The Aztecs didn't just build farms. They built an ecosystem that made everything around it more alive. Here's what the research consistently shows. The chinampa system solves for almost every major challenge in 21st century food production. Water scarcity, addressed by capillary irrigation that needs almost no external pumping. Soil depletion, reversed by continuous canal sediment cycling. Chemical dependency, eliminated by companion planting and natural fertilization. Urban food deserts, shrunk by moving production directly into the city. Carbon emissions, reduced. Chinampa soils actively sequester carbon. The Aztecs didn't design a farming system. They designed a closed-loop ecological machine, and they ran it for over 200 years without it breaking down. You came into this video expecting a story about ancient history, but here's what the story actually is. The knowledge didn't disappear. The farmers in Xochimilco still know how to build a chinampa. The canal network is partially intact. The axolotls are still there, barely, but there. The question the researchers keep asking isn't whether chinampas work. The data on that is settled. 7 harvests per year. 3 metric tons of maize per hectare. A closed-loop system that ran for centuries without outside inputs. The question is whether modern cities are willing to admit that a civilization from 700 years ago solved something we haven't. We built highways on top of their solution. We drained the lakes to get dry land, then spent the next 500 years struggling to feed the people living on it. And now, the researchers studying the problem are pointing back to the lake, back to the islands, back to the mud, the canals, the willow trees, and the farmers who never stopped knowing how it worked. If that story pulls at something, if you find yourself wondering what other ancient systems we dismantled before we understood them, subscribe, not to support the channel, because history keeps turning out to be more useful than we expect.